Welcome to the Hello FirstName podcast. The Hello FirstName podcast revolves around the term personalization and is brought to you by marketing author Rasmus Houlind, founder of Omnichannel Institute and Chief Experience Officer at the marketing automation software company Agilic. The podcast is based on the book Hello FirstName. Each episode is based in turn on a chapter from the book, followed by a discussion of the very same chapter with an expert marketing practitioner in the following episode. As always, you can buy the book on Amazon or other bookstores. You can also choose to listen to it all for free on your favorite podcast service. You're also very welcome to download the abstract of the book for free, and all models, of course, are able to download. All downloads are sponsored by Agilic. I'll make sure to put a link to everything in the show notes. But you can always connect on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to reply and help out. Hello, and welcome to the Hello FirstName podcast. This is the second episode. First episode was the recording and the audiobook reading of the first chapter of the book, namely the Hype of Personalization. So as the idea is with this podcast, we'll be interchangeably reading the chapters aloud, and subsequently we'll be having conversations with experts in the field around the topic that was in the chapter that just came out. So that's sort of the idea, and I'm really happy that you are listening in on this podcast. The theme of today and the chapter of today from Hello FirstName is the one about the hype of personalization, about how consumers expect personalization, or do they, and brands had better deliver. What is the tech hype of personalization, and how can it be that every year seems to be the year of personalization? And to discuss that with me here in the studio today, I have invited David Mannheim. Welcome, David.
Hi.
And David is also an author of a book about personalization. So in fact, we met each other through common people in our network. And first, I was super afraid that David would write a book that was much better than mine, and he probably did. It's not out yet, so the jury's still out. I read it, and I think it's actually at least maybe more entertaining than the one I've made. But nonetheless, we decided to hook up and exchange views, and also potentially share our networks. So that's what we're here to do today. And David, maybe you can give a brief introduction about yourself and sort of your history and your way into the realm of personalization.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I founded a conversion rate optimization consultancy called User Conversion back in 2015, which seems like years and years and years ago. And that got successfully acquired by a great company called Brain Labs in 2021. So my route into personalization was probably already there, dependent on your definition of it. But I was very much focused on CRO, experimentation, A/B testing, user psychology, customer analytics, that type of stuff. And it wasn't until, I don't know, some comings together of commercial giants destroying my trust in brands and relationship marketing that I decided to explore this in a lot more detail, and henceforth wrote The Person in Personalization, which comes out on the 29th of August. You can pre-order it on the 22nd. So yeah,
you can almost pre-order. I think is the Kindle book maybe already.
The Kindle book's available, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is hardback, you know. They're not like those paperbacks that you sometimes get. Hello FirstName.
Clearly a sign of quality there, yeah.
Yeah, perhaps.
I wanted to make it light and easy to put in your bag, and that was my idea.
Oh, it's great. It's a great book. I enjoyed it. It's very practical, you know, whereas mine is slightly more, which is probably why you've asked me to talk about this, but it's slightly more conceptual.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've definitely introduced some personality into it. Let's put it that way. I would classify it as funny, but who knows?
I revisited the manuscript leading up to the small recording here, and I was delighted to get back into the fairy tale of personalization that you've put together, and just the way that you're writing is very, very entertaining and deep and good as well. So today's topic, the hype of personalization. I would like to first ask you, do you feel the hype? What is your view of the hype? Just from the top or from the bottom of your heart, actually, is there a hype about personalization?
Well, yeah, just as like you said, every year seems to be the year of personalization. You could probably count it all the way back to like the Gutenberg press or Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People in 1936. 1936 could be the year of personalization. I think it
Long
was
time
also the
ago.
year of the Spanish Civil War. I think that probably overshadowed it. But it definitely feels as though there's a demand from personalization from the customer. There's no question about that. There's too much sensory input. Curation is an absolute need, and therefore people assume that personalization is the equivalent of curation, and that is why consumers need it, which totally makes sense. So you can see that in the explosion in the MarTech stack. You can see it in the explosion of adverts. I think we're exposed to, 14,000 adverts per day now.
Wow.
So personalization is absolutely necessary from a consumer perspective. From a business perspective, because it's necessary from a consumer perspective, businesses assume that it is the next big thing. But they have been assuming that for a good, I would say 2015 actually is when I classified the genuine year of personalization. It seemed like that's when the explosion really happened, which is
Why
also
was
the year
that?
that I
What happened in
started.
2015 that made it
There were quite a number of
made it?
different things. New companies were formed. I'd have to revisit my book for the specifics, but new companies were formed. The MarTech graph of all the different tech stacks. That's when
Yeah.
personalization became an actual category within there. There were a number of different things that just seemed to click more than anything. So there was something about that year. And ever since then, it feels as though companies have tried to reinvent the name of personalization, either for commercial gain or for self-interest or marketing awareness or whatever it might be. And because they're unable to achieve what this paradise of one-to-one personalization should have been, through data restrictions and accessibility and technology restrictions and accessibility and even strategic restrictions and accessibility, that nothing's ever been reached. And so it almost feels at the turn of every new year, people tend to think, this is the year of personalization, finally. And until there's some kind of catalyst or seismic shift in the movement, then I don't think that's ever going to be realized, unfortunately. Those are my views, anyways.
So the thing about you mentioned this thing about the term personalization constantly being sort of
Reinvented.
modified or altered, or the perspectives change a bit. Made me think of the Gartner hype cycle
Yeah.
and the life of personalization in the Gartner hype cycle, where we have like different categories that then suddenly you have personification and personalization goes out. Then you have the personalization engines. Was it a bad idea to
Really
put the
bizarre.
personalization in an engine? But as a topic, it's really good. And then you have the multi-channel marketing hub as a technology category that actually seems to be progressing really well. How do you see that that movement or that confusion? What does that mean? What should we take away from that?
Well, look, I think one of the biggest, and this is not to diss Gartner, so Gartner, please don't sue me, but I've just identified something that I think is just quite interesting, okay? So personalization first came into the Gartner hype cycle, I think it was 2018, maybe 2016. A year later, it was gone, and it had a 2 to 5 year lifespan, okay? It immediately got shoved into the trough of disillusionment just before the plateau of productivity, and it was just gone. It disappeared, only to be replaced by the very same things that run it, personalization engines. Okay,
Yeah.
that came in at the slope of enlightenment,
Bottom.
and that was again a 2 to 5 year lifespan. A year later, it was gone. In 2019, it was replaced by this thing, the personification. Now
Yeah.
that had a 5 to 10 year lifespan. And you're probably asking, well, what is personification? Well, it was created by a guy called Andrew Frank at Gartner. And essentially, it's just a spin on the term of personalization. It's I think, actually a very good spin, to be fair to Mr. Frank, because it's all about using personal data, which insinuates that personalization should be, I don't know, the right term for the use of personal data.
Yeah.
That had a 5 to 10 year lifespan. And it stayed around on the Gartner hype cycle for a number of years, much longer than personalization. And I just find that interesting that Gartner, the ones that created it, it stayed on their hype cycle for a much longer period of time through something that they, technically speaking, invented or coined. I just find that very curious. So for me, I feel as though brands, not specific to Gartner, but they tend to reinvent what the term personalization is, or almost to keep it on this ventilator every single year. And it feels as though it's been molded into this Frankenstein monster of something that it should never have been. And we seem to have lost what I would call the person in personalization.
But going back to the hype, where do you think the hype comes from? Who's creating the hype about personalization?
Vendors.
Vendors, tech vendors mainly?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you got to think about it. Tech vendors have a purpose. Their purpose is to sell their tech. How do they sell their tech? They have to create case studies and evidence behind why their tech works. If they're a personalization provider, they have to immediately associate a revenue uplift in order to do these things. And I think I cited it in my book. I took a look at a few different 100 case studies of personalization and saw an ROI uplift of anywhere between, I think, like 9% was the least, and 1,200% was the most. It's just unrealistic and unbelievable. And clearly some vendors don't understand the concepts of statistical significance. That being said, it's vendors, those specifically who get a level of investment, of which rather biasly I am one of those, that sell this tech and associate a revenue figure to it. And in doing so, almost create unrealistic expectations without understanding the effort that's required to see those gains. So rather cynically, I would say vendors is pretty high up on my list of those naughty people that, and well within their rights to do that, right, Rasmus? You know, they have marketing. It's pretty good marketing.
Yeah, I think we're no exception to at least having played a little part in creating or at least sustaining the hype on this.
Absolutely. And agencies are the same, by the way. Essentially, anybody that sells something immediately associates that it's designed for a revenue-based incentive. And for me, that's not the purpose of personalization, but that's why the hype has stayed alive. It'll get you money, it'll get you money, it'll get you money, it'll get you money. And it's seen as the shiny new object syndrome every single year.
Yeah. So I think, so as part of the research for Hello FirstName, my co-author, Frans Riemersma from the marketing tribe, Martech tribe, sorry, he has some data actually from, so he had a robot crawl, I think, 10,000 vendor websites, and then based on marketing buzzwords from Wikipedia, he scanned those websites to see which of the buzzwords appeared most. And guess what? Personalization was top of the list. So by far the most hyped or most used hype buzzword among all these different types of vendors, because that's the fun part of it. You'd have the personalization engines, you'd have the so-called multi-channel marketing hubs or marketing automation platforms, you'll be having the customer data platforms, and all these different types of platforms will all be throwing the name in vain. Everybody would be claiming to have some kind of connection with personalization, or enabling or fueling or enhancing personalization to one extent or the other.
Well, here's a question. Can you think, I can, but can you think of another technology where people tack on to a trend in order to do that thing? I.e. the tech stack is now becoming very much like everything's personalized. It feels very much like AI for me. Every single tech vendor has some kind of AI capability. AI. And what you will probably find is that every year is the year of AI from here on in. So thinking back, so when I published my first book, that was in 2015. Then big data was the term that was on everybody's list. And then later came AI as sort of a predictive analytics version of the AI. And suddenly now we have the generative AI. And just everything that used to be AI and has been working within AI for many years is now suddenly super hyped again, even though it's the same stuff and it's been evolving fairly, I wouldn't say statically, but at a fair pace. But still, I cannot say that we're not on the verge of something big with AI. I'm simply not that much into it. But let's get back to talking about personalization in AI later, because that's definitely also a thing I think that's worth discussing.
So is it real? I mean, we discussed, and also when I was doing the foreword for your book, which I'm very, very thankful that I got to write. I mean, with the skepticism and the sarcasm that you clearly demonstrate when you're writing, it could almost lead one to believe that you don't believe in the term personalization or in the concept, and that it won't ever make these money that the tech vendors promise. So, David, do you in fact believe that you can make money as a company by working with personalization?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fair question.
I mean, there's too much evidence to suggest that there's an ROI within personalization to suggest otherwise. I think my message is more about the balance of that. Personalization is designed, in my mind, as a communication principle to create relationships between brand and customer, to be more personable in how you are communicating with that individual. That does not necessarily mean one-to-one. It does not necessarily mean segmentation. It means it's designed to be a communication principle that infers familiarity and acknowledgement and trust and loyalty and a relationship. However, I feel as though the current narrative is so imbalanced towards a ROI, a revenue uplift on personalization, that people almost lose what it's originally designed for. One of my best stats that I cite in my book is McKinsey suggests that you get a 10% uplift in ROI from personalization. Fabulous. In revenue, for reference.
Revenue,
so 10% uplift in revenue in ROI from personalization. They also state in the very same breath that you get a 30% increase in customer satisfaction when doing personalization. Now, those two things have a disparity between them that suggests you get a greater uplift from customer satisfaction than you do from revenue. And therefore, just by virtue, you should be focusing on this as your purpose for personalization, not this.
I think, I think I can agree to that, because one thing that I'll be discussing with another expert later on in this podcast is the concept of value and value creation. And I think definitely within personalization, there's a distinction between short-term value creation and long-term value creation. Yeah. And I believe that if you are constantly focusing on optimizing the conversion rate or the short-term metrics, as I regard conversion rate to be, then you'd be losing out on some of the long-term effects that personalization can definitely bring you by being more personable, by actually serving content and features and functionality and whatever that the customer would find useful will increase their customer satisfaction and will thus increase their long-term customer loyalty and the customer lifetime value. So absolutely. I believe that customer satisfaction is probably what you could call a proxy metric for what will be the actual value creation that you could be getting. But I believe that maybe people are, or these tech vendors are, what I do believe they're guilty in is the downplaying the amount of work that goes into actually making the personalization come alive. So in order to get the license cost or the whole project cost, total cost of ownership seem lower, they downplay the actual effort it takes in terms of man hours and consulting and integration and such, and claiming that that's super easy. And thus and that's what will be keeping a lot of companies from actually getting the benefits, because they've been convinced that they don't have to invest as much into people and processes.
Yeah, everything's a single script that's a 5-minute installation, isn't it? Everything has like over-inflated expectations. Even cars nowadays, for goodness sake, cars sell you the dream that, you know, you're going to be driving down a long windy road in the sun listening to, I don't know, Barry White on your Bose stereo system. But the reality is that you're hunched up in the rain, driving to work with the kids kicking your back seat, and that new car smell has gone immediately. Those expectations just go like that. So I think absolutely it's overselling, it's setting expectations. I mean, in my book, I talk about the number one barrier that prevents people from personalizing properly, and that is effort. It's not data, it's not technology, it's people to some extent, but it's people's concept of effort. And I do think that's why AI will be successful in some form.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. Let's dwell a bit with the consumer expectations. So
so one of the claims, I think this comes from a McKinsey report, as I recall, is that consumers demand personalization, and brands had better deliver. And that makes me. I thought about this when I read the intro to your book. I reread it just this morning, in fact, and you were reflecting on your experience within Disney World. So being there, and I mean, with a company that is so really emotional, connected to you. I know you're famous for really enjoying Disney World and Disney, the whole universe of it, and then suddenly finding yourself in Disney World, feeling totally not personalized to, just one of the masses, one in the masses, and having this experience that actually was pretty far from individualization. And is it true? Do consumers expect personalization? I mean, clearly there was something in your Disney World experience that didn't live up to expectations. But do consumers expect it, or don't they? And to which extent?
Yeah, there's far too much choice in order not to expect personalization. Like I say, there's that 7 to 14,000 ads a day citation that we're exposed to. We need to curate, okay? But we also just need to choose a relationship or a level of intimacy or some kind of loyalty towards a brand. So the more personable we feel, or the more intimate we feel with that brand, and the more they make us feel like a human rather than like a number, which is what my experience with Disney's been, the more likely we are to retain with them, to be loyal to them. So that is the reason why brands should, in theory, be personalizing towards us. Our expectations as consumers, as you know, has just grown and grown and grown and grown and grown over the years. Choice proliferation has absolutely added to that. So I think my experience with Disney, just very quickly, is that I felt I've been, I think, 35 times now. 30. I'm going again in October. I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm very, very fortunate, but I feel more like a number than a name. And it came to a head. I'm just, like I say, I'm a sucker. It came to a head in 2019 where they announced their personalized app that basically said, okay, here is Disney. We have over 100 different rides, over 140 different restaurants. You tell us what your preferences are, and we will make recommendations as to what you should be doing. If you like thrill rides and Princess and the Frog, we're going to recommend Big Thunder Mountain, and you see Princess Tiana, I don't know, at the Hall of Presidents or something. That was what was promised. What was released was actually an app that charged more, not for that service, because that service doesn't even exist, but for you to ride specific rides. So it became not an app for personalization for the customer, but an app that was designed to nickel and dime the guest, to charge you more, to skip queues, to experience different rides, etc., etc. And it was surge charge
app, basically.
Exactly, and it felt like you are prioritizing the needs of the brand and the business above the needs of the guest.
Yeah. And I think there really has to be a balance there, because I mean, why would companies make any effort to personalize anything if it weren't for making more money down the road? Why should they care? I mean, maybe not to get the money right here now, but at least to get it later. How do you see the balance between short and long term value creation?
It was fascinating. How do you create more money? You either get more money down the funnel, or you charge more for your service. And in Disney's aspect, you got to think they're an experiential thing, i.e., they're a theme park that has a limited capacity of 100,000 guests a day, in the Magic Kingdom, anyways. So you either get more through the door, but when they're currently the highest demand they've ever been to, thanks to COVID, you know, what was once gone, people need to get that magic back again, so they go back, like me. Then they charge more. So, you know, guest spending is increasing the Disney parks by 40% year on year. That means if you were spending $100 last year, you are now spending $140 this year for exactly the same service.
Wow.
So I've kind of forgotten your question, but I think the notion of the notion of immediacy, which is why conversion rate is a result that's often prioritized, it trumps the more intangible, insensible parts of customer satisfaction that are more long term.
Quite often, yeah, I agree.
And one of the reasons why is because everyone has an investor. Disney has investors. You know, they've got BlackRock as one of their biggest investors who demand a return on their investment, and that needs to be within a 3, 5, 7 year period. And that has been exaggerated over COVID. So immediacy always trumps long-term.
But can't you get into a situation where you are jeopardizing the long-term value by pushing for the conversion here and now too much? I mean, I believe that is almost what you felt looking in the app and just not feeling as if you were buying into something, but really feel like you were being sold to.
100%. The person who created that app was a chap called Bob Chapek. Amongst the Disney community, we called him Bob Chapek. He was the ex-CFO of Disney that got promoted to the CEO once Bob Iger left. He lasted 2 years because he focused so much on immediacy, on immediate revenue gain. Why? A, because of ego, because he needed to make a stamp and he needed to prove some kind of value in the stock. And did that work out well for him, I hear you ask? No. He left within 2 years, and Bob Iger, retired, had to come back. So I think there is always a consequence, but the person running that consequence, in that case the CEO, I don't know whether they care too much. I think they are beholden to their investors who demand that level of immediacy. So it's not as prioritized as retention or loyalty. Maybe I just have a huge chip on my shoulder.
I think as a consumer, we have this. I mean, everybody knows the feeling of being sold to, the like getting stalked by something that you perhaps even already bought and popping up everywhere. And that's at least one of the examples that I hear people mention now and then, and again, actually, that something they already bought, maybe somewhere else, continues to pop up and really spamming them or spamming their field of vision when they're visiting websites and such. I think that's one of the things that I hear people are most annoyed with, feeling sold to as opposed to feeling genuinely helped. So we're working with a health and beauty retailer here in Denmark called Matas. Actually, they're extremely successful with personalization and with omnichannel marketing. Recently purchased or acquired their Swedish competitor, which actually, so it's kind of little David buying Goliath, because actually they have more stores in Sweden, but they're doing better. One of the things that they do really well, I think, is, they're not afraid to push the campaign button and make sure that they keep customers inspired. But what they actually do really well is that as soon as you buy into a new category, say makeup or whatever, they will pause the continuous selling and campaign track for you, and instead tell you about how you make the most, so dwelling with the purchase in the new category, telling you and advising you on how to apply it and how to get the most out of your purchase. And actually it turns out that this converts really, really well, because people find this to be genuinely helpful, and actually for some odd reason, in terms of short-term conversions, it actually also works better. So as opposed to, and especially if you compare it to just keep on hammering people with the campaigns. So I think that's a pretty good example of where, is personalization out there to create money, or is it out to create a good customer experience? And in the end, wouldn't a good customer experience ultimately lead to the more money? Maybe not just here and now, but you won't sort of deplete your resources or So that's my idea about it, at least. So I think some of the hype, going back to the hype a bit here, wouldn't you say that the stuff that Amazon has been sharing, this around personalization, the stuff that Netflix has been sharing about personalization, hasn't that been an important part of creating the hype as well?
I think they're the two examples where they have shaped what personalization actually means. In the notion of recommendations. So, Amazon created recommendations, for goodness sake. They've got a paper from 23 years ago that won what's called the Test of Time Award, because no other technology has had a greater influence in the world of digital marketing than the concept of recommendations, which is something that Amazon created, regardless. The fact that they're seen as being so commercially successful, the fact that they're so overt within how they label that they're doing personalization, the fact that it's so transparent that this form of personalization is there in front of your face, it's visible, it is even labeled with "we recommend," for goodness sake, that it's easily copied. So people see that as being a visible thing, tangible. They see it as being easy to replicate because a lot of other companies offer recommendations. They see it as being a definition of being commercially successful. Mm-hmm. And they take those three things, and because they defined it as personalization, so too do we or other retailers define recommendations as personalization. It's not their it's not that it's their fault, but they've led us blindly down a cul-de-sac of what their definition of personalization.
So it's a too myopic definition of the term personalization. So they almost monopolize the perception of personalization as something that is like one-to-one equal to product recommendations.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
you got the product recommendations sorted, personalization done.
Yeah, I mean, finding a product is what, 1/4, 1/5 of the overall concept of how a user would actually buy something. Yeah. So are we just saying that personalization is the equivalent of that 1/4?
Yeah. Not in my book.
Well, exactly, not in my book either.
Yeah. I'm not sure it creates a lot of like this feeling of being personable. I at least that's my perception of Amazon is that yes, it may be like mechanistically correct and okay recommendations that I get. It's definitely better than not being logged in and just getting the general Amazon store. Definitely better than that. But apart from that, I don't feel recognized as a person, and I don't feel acknowledged and spoken to, and the personality feeling, the warmth is totally gone.
Well, I mean, here's an interesting concept that we can explore if you'd like. I certainly do in my book. I wonder if you felt that 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I think that your consumer expectations has grown over the years. Okay. Now, because everybody does recommendations, you no longer feel that way, and you need more, you need more, you need more. So, yeah, I think that originally you would have felt spoken to as an individual, but your expectations.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting hypothesis. So, so gradually, I think this may be sort of a raise of arms here, that you have the consumers expecting more. I even hear stories of people. There's this distinction between experienced personalization and actual personalization, because you can't get the feeling. So the ones will be watching an ad, which is completely randomly put in front of them, but it just happens to be promoting something that is top of their to-do list that they want to buy, can experience this as something that is extremely personalized. And maybe that's because I was talking about it and Facebook was listening in on my web, whatever, on my calls. And so that must be why I'm getting this particular offer right here and then, where it can actually be that it's just completely fluke or random coincidence. So people are also seeing, to my experience at least, they're seeing personalization in places where it actually isn't. But because of the perceived relevance, they are thinking this must be personalization. And then sometimes they are indeed met with personalized communication, and they're feeling the warmth of this, and that will in turn increase their expectations as to, whenever they want to like change channels or revisit a store, that they expect the favorite brand to know everything about them, everything they ever said, purchased, or downloaded, or clicked on, or whatever, is to be taken into account, and they get a bit upset if it isn't. Is that where we're going? That people are almost like, oh, wow, I have to say this again, but I bought this last week, and now you are recommending me this, and this is totally wrong.
I think so, buddy. Yeah, there's a really good synopsis. You should write a book.
I may write one more. Yeah.
I think so. I think consumer expectations are increasing. Businesses need to question not necessarily do we need personalization, but what is the purpose of it for our business?
Yeah.
I think that's all it comes down to is purpose. Why are you doing what it is that you're doing? Yeah. Don't go down that cul-de-sac blindly like the Amazons and Netflix. Or, they've been very successful. Don't let them lead you down into what your purpose should be for your consumers. Yeah. Ask yourself, why are you doing what it is that you're doing? And if you need to associate that to some kind of KPI, really investigate what that KPI should be. Yeah. Because if you blindly do it for revenue, for solely revenue orientation, you're going to create personalization that is designed for you as a brand, not necessarily for them, for the customer who it is that you're serving. And I think there's quite a short-termist way of thinking.
Yeah, and as we will explore later in a later episode, actually, once you get to a very mature level of personalization, that's where the short-termism loses ground in favor of more next best experience and more long-term customer satisfaction, emotional loyalty, and such. But that's for another episode. So we're talking about the technology and the technology vendors being partly responsible for creating the hype. Do you believe, though, that technology actually has become more mature over, say, the last 5 years?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, AI has seen that alone. I think it's just where that's leading us to. If you wanted to discuss AI, I think that
that was my next topic, so we can dive into that.
Well, there are almost two different forms of AI. There's specifically when we talk about personalization, but there's curation and creation. I think large language models has led us towards a creation mentality, generative AI, for example. Whereas previous to that, it's been all about curation, which is why we have recommendations here, there, and everywhere. We associated heaps of effort preventing personalization from being successful. Curation AI was the answer to a lot of that, and therefore we started to create recommendations, a form of personalization that required very little effort using AI. But
the content was already there.
Yeah, 100%. It's been there for a long time. But AI has only become to the forefront of most people's minds thanks to its accessibility within ChatGPT and its advances with large language models, that it's using creation AI, i.e. what most people call generative AI. And this is a form of AI that can create a level of intimacy based on the individual's preferences, tone of voice, yada yada. We can go down this road if we need to. In an instance, I think that's where personalization will be successful. Personalization will be at the behest of AI. AI will reduce the effort that's required in personalization. I just question whether AI can ever create intimacy to the extent that it feels genuine and human and create that relationship that's required between brand and customer. I do not know the answer to that.
No, I think the future holds the answer for us on that one. But definitely, I agree with you. What I'm thinking, so just very briefly, my take on the generative AI part is that we've been having AI working for us for many years within personalization, building or crafting or generating insights at a customer level. So based on transaction history or whatever, which product would I most likely find most useful? But also sort of propensity scoring for which customers would be most likely interested and to which extent in this category or that category, or churn propensity scoring, who's most likely going to leave us and for which reason. And these insights, which happen to be related to the one side of the bow tie of personalization, which is the main model in Hello FirstName. These insights would then feed into the messaging that you'd put in front of people and into the content feed, the recommendations, the product recommendations, the show recommendations, the song recommendations, or the playlist recommendations in the case of Spotify.
Yeah.
And you can say with that part of the content feeds, the content is already there. It's not content that the marketer needs to create. Merely it's a matter of curation, as you say. So how do we sort it? How do we group it? How do we mark up different kinds of content within the content feeds based on their properties, or whether they've been bought before or listened before, whether they're on sale or whatever. And the last part of the bow tie would then be the creative messages, which is really what has been and all still is, I think, where a lot of the effort needs to come in, because you need the creative writers, you need the people who are doing the images. This is where you put together your fancy TikTok dance that you put on TikTok and whatnot. All this creativity and all this work that has to be put into this. I feel that now we have a new friend that can help us finally scale that last part of the bow tie and the last part of personalization. But still, I was trying it out actually, for the sake of also getting a first-hand experience with it. And I found that ChatGPT was perfectly good for generating drafts and for I actually used generative AI to help make the article that I wrote about generative AI. And it got me to like 70, 75, 80% of the way fairly quickly. But I still had to spend quite some work to make it something that was from me and that was personable or personal, as you probably call it. And I think that works with text, but for images or for video, it's really hard, at least for me or for the general marketer, to use an image that is 80% okay. So I asked Midjourney to draw me an image of a young, fit, Nordic-looking man working out at the gym, a bit like you, could have been you, and he was doing bench press, and the image that I got had 3 hands, and so that's, I mean, so an image that is 80% off is completely useless. Whereas a text that is 80% off, I can work with that. And probably some graphical artists could remove the 3rd hand and it'll be sort of okay. So it will get me to having a draft. Writer's block is gone.
That's the benefit of a large language model, is that it learns, on a daily, hourly, weekly, monthly basis. Basis.
And I think these will be weeded out.
In 2 years, give it a year, 6 months, 2 years. How long did it take the chess AI to defeat that grandmaster? I think it was three attempts, wasn't it? Over 1,000 games. Yeah. And now that they've had 978 attempts at beating the chess AI, no one can beat it. So the more that it learns, the better it will get. So that 3rd hand will go.
Yeah, I think so too. But at the moment and where we are, you'll be using the generative AI to help you get better to having a draft or having something that's almost okay, and then you can tweak it. You still want to be supervising whatever it is that you'll be putting in front of customers, because I mean, it could be super inappropriate if I'm suddenly the 3 hands, or maybe not inappropriate, but just weird, really.
Maybe people from the Nordics have 3 hands. I think maybe you should cut that out of your podcast. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you should definitely come and visit us, and I'm sure we can do the count together, David. I think actually this concludes today's podcast. So I think to sort of end off with here, where can people reach you, and where can they find out more about you and what you're working with? How can people get closer to this fantastic understanding of personalization that you also showing here?
So my book, here we go. It's real. It's available on the 29th of August. You can buy it from Amazon. Just type in The Person in Personalization. I am also the founder of a new business called Made with Intent, which helps people understand the intent of their audience to enable us as retailers to be more appropriate to their messages, their needs. I think it's a fantastic proposition. I am, of course, biased, but some of the learnings from the book enabled me to create this concept, which is known as intent.
So a website personalization tool that is actually not about product recommendations.
Well, absolutely. It's less so about finding stuff and more so about being appropriate, doing more with less, as it were. We classify it more of an analytics tool than a personalization platform.
Interesting.
But yeah, so madewithintent.ai. And just follow me on LinkedIn. I'm usually ranting about some kind of Disney or Manchester United issue. So yeah, I'll be there.
All right. We'll make sure to put all the relevant links in the show notes. And thank you so much again for joining us, David. I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.